Minimum Wages Act, 1948. Minimum Wages Act is another social legislation to provide safeguard to workers who are employed in unorganized sectors. Minimum Wages Act came into force on 15 March, 1948, and is applicable to whole of India. Prior to enactments of acts such as Payment of Wages Act, 1936 and Minimum Wages Act, 1948, the conditions of workers was very disgraceful or terrible in certain employments. Workers were exploited by employers in many ways, like non-payment of wages or low rates of wages. Under this act, both central and state government are known as appropriate government, with respect to their jurisdiction. For those employments which are carried on by or under the authority of the central government, then appropriate government would be central government. For example, railway administration, mine, oil field, major port, or any corporation established by a central act. Other than above-mentioned employments, state government would be appropriate government. For fixing minimum wages in certain employments, appropriate government has made schedule and included several employments into the schedule. The schedule is made into two parts. Part 1 contains 21 employments, whereas Part 2 contains only one employment, agriculture. Now we shall look into some of the important definitions under this act. Definition 1. Employer. Who is known as employer? Employer is a person who employs other person either directly or indirectly, or whether on behalf of himself or any other person. In a factory where scheduled employment is carried on, manager is considered as employer as per Factories Act, 1948. In central or state government, the person authority appointed for the supervision and control of employees. If such person is not appointed, then head of the department is considered as employer. In case of local authority, like municipal corporation, the person appointed or the chief executive officer of the local authority is considered as employer. In any other case, person responsible to the owner for the supervision and control of the employees or for the payment of wages is considered as employer. Definition 2. Wages. Meaning of wages. Wages means all remuneration capable of expressing in terms of money, which is payable after fulfillment of terms of employment, whether it is express or implied. Wages includes house rent allowance, HRA. Following are the items which should not be included in wages: house accommodation, supply of light, water, medical attendance, or any other amenity or service. Any contribution paid by the employer provident fund or social insurance. Any traveling allowance or the value of any traveling concession. Any sum paid towards settling of special expenses entitled by employee or any gratuity payable on discharge of employment. Definition 3. Employee. Who is an employee? Employee means any person who is employed for hire or reward to do any work, whether it is skilled or unskilled, manual or clerical. The term employee also includes an outworker, to whom any articles or materials are given out by another person which are to be made up, cleaned, washed, altered, ornamented, finished, repaired, adapted or otherwise processed for sale for the purposes of the trade or business, either at his home or in premises, not being in control and management of that other person. But the term employee does not include any member of the armed forces of the Union. Section 3. Fixing of minimum rates of wages. The responsibility of fixing minimum wages lies with appropriate government. Minimum wages can be fixed by appropriate government on whole state or part of the state, or to specified classes employed in such employment. Minimum wages should be reviewed at every 5 years, but minimum rates of wages will be fixed or revised only if it is necessary. Section 3(1)(a) Minimum number of employees. Minimum number of employees in the particular scheduled employment in the whole state shall be taken into consideration at the time of fixing minimum wages. If the number of employees are less than 1,000 in the particular employment, appropriate government will not fix the minimum wages. If the numbers of employees are 1,000 or more in the particular employment, then appropriate government will fix the minimum wages. Section 3, subsection 2. Minimum rates. The appropriate government may fix minimum rates based on minimum time rate, minimum piece rate, guaranteed time rate, overtime rate. Minimum time rate. In minimum time rate, wages are payable based on time spent by the worker at work. Minimum piece rate. In minimum piece rate, wages are payable based on units produced by the worker. Guaranteed time rate. Guaranteed time rate is remuneration, which are applicable to the workers who were employed on piece rate basis. Guaranteed time rate is addition of pieces produced plus time spent. Overtime rate. It is the amount payable for the extra work performed exceeding the normal stipulated time. Section 3(2)(a). Section 3(2)(a) states that revised minimum wage rates are not applicable on cases of industrial dispute, which are relating to the rates of wages payable, and is pending for proceedings before a tribunal under the Industrial Disputes Act 1947. Revision or fixation of minimum rates of wages may be based on following. Different minimum rate of wages can be fixed for different scheduled employment, different class of work in the same scheduled employment, adults, adolescents, children and apprentices in different localities. Minimum rates of wages may be fixed by any one or more of the following periods, like by hour, day, month or such other larger wage period, if any prescribed by Payment of Wages Act. Section 4, Minimum rate of wages. Any minimum rate of wages fixed or revised by the appropriate government in respect of scheduled employments may consist of a basic rate of wages plus cost of living allowance, or a basic rate of wages plus with or without the cost of living allowance plus concessional cash value of the essential commodities supplied, or basic rate plus the cost of living allowance plus concessional cash value of essential commodities supplied. Note: the minimum rate of wages consists of a basic wage, and dearness allowance is linked to the Consumer Price Index number, but it is not necessary that minimum wages should be parallel equal to the cost of living index. Section 5. Procedure for fixing and revising minimum wages. Step 1. Appropriate government appoints committees and subcommittees to hold enquiries and advise in respect of such fixation or revision. Step 2. Appropriate government publishes its proposal in Official Gazette, informing the persons who are likely to be affected, and date of consideration of proposal will be published. Please note, date of consideration will be not less than 2 months. Step 3. After considering the advice of the committee appointed, the appropriate government notifies in the Official Gazette to fix or revise the minimum rates of wages, which shall be effected on the expiry of 3 months from the date of notification. Now we shall sum up all the points discussed in Minimum Wages Act. Minimum Wages Act 1948 is extended to whole of India including the state of Jammu and Kashmir, with effect from 1st September 1971. This act is not applicable to any member of armed forces of the Union. Appropriate government fixes rates of minimum wages. Appropriate government reviews the rates of minimum wages within 5 years. There are two methods of fixation of wage rates. They are committee method and notification method. Different minimum rate of wages can be fixed for different scheduled employment, different class of work in the same scheduled employment, adults, adolescents, children and apprentices in different localities. Minimum rates of wages may be fixed by any one or more of the following periods, like by hour, day, month or such other larger wage period, if any prescribed by Payment of Wages Act. Employers required maintaining register and records showing the details of person employed, work done, wages paid and receipt given by them, etc. As per Section 22A, any employer who violates any provision or rule of this Act will be punishable, which may extend up to 500 rupees. Non-payment of minimum wages entitles imprisonment of 6 months or fine of rupees 500 or both. In case of wages are to be payable to a disabled person, then appropriate government may direct that the provision of this Act will not be applicable. Central government has power to give direction to any state government for execution of this Act. By giving 3 months' notice, the appropriate government has power to add any employment into the schedule. Thank you.